Hello, my amazing students, and a heartfelt welcome back to English in Fluency, that special place we share where we constantly explore powerful ideas designed to help you truly grow your confidence, to really, truly improve your English skills, and to think deeply about life's big questions at the same time. I am Alex, your dedicated guide on this journey of discovery. And honestly, I am just so incredibly delighted you've chosen to join me today for what I believe will be an exceptionally important, deeply insightful, and truly transformative conversation, especially for all of you who are working hard to master English. You know, whether you're listening from the quiet, peaceful comfort of your home, perhaps sipping a warm cup of coffee or tea as the morning light gently streams in through your window, and the world outside is just beginning to wake up around you, with the gentle sounds of birds chirping or the distant hum of city traffic. Or maybe you're on the bus during your daily commute, watching the city lights or green fields go by outside your window, lost in thoughtful reflection. Perhaps you're cooking a delicious meal for your family, filling your kitchen with wonderful aromas and the gentle, comforting sounds of your daily life. Or even just relaxing quietly at home, with your headphones on, letting your mind wander and unwind after a busy day, finding a precious moment of peace and calm. I just want to say a big, sincere, and personal thank you for taking this precious moment for yourself, for investing in your personal and professional growth, because that truly matters, and it's something to be profoundly proud of. Here on this podcast, our consistent and unwavering goal is always to talk about learning English in a way that feels easy to understand, that's genuinely fun and engaging, and truly useful for you in your everyday life, making your learning journey both effective and, well, deeply enjoyable and rewarding. And today, we are diving into something that will deeply change how you see the world and how you learn English. Critical thinking. Listen to me carefully. English is not difficult. English is not impossible. You can speak English fluently, and you can do it faster than you think. Sometimes you might hesitate. You might get stuck. And maybe you have even been learning English for years. You know the words. You understand English when you read or listen. But something still feels like a barrier. Many of you listening are intermediate English learners, which is a fantastic stage to be at. You have a good foundation. You can understand a lot, but you want to move beyond simply translating in your head. You want to understand the true meaning, the hidden implications, the speaker's true intent. Today, we're going to talk about a mental skill, a superpower, that will help you break through those barriers, not just in English, but in every part of your life. Let's get started. There is a powerful force within the human mind that, once awakened, reshapes everything it touches. It dismantles illusions. It exposes lies. It uncovers buried truths. And it dares to challenge what has always been accepted without question. This force is not brute strength. It is not inherited privilege. It is not external power or authority. It is the rare ability to think, not passively, but actively, not reactively, but intentionally. It is the art and the discipline of critical thinking, the mind's greatest power, a true superpower for navigating the modern world. For English learners, especially at the intermediate level, this is absolutely vital. Most minds are trained to absorb information, not to question it. They are conditioned to repeat what they hear, not to reason for themselves. They are taught to obey, not to observe deeply. The average mind scrolls through headlines, quickly swallows opinions presented as facts, and then moves on without a second thought. This happens in English learning too. You might read a news article in English and just accept everything it says, without considering the source or the bias. You might hear a native speaker say something, and instead of asking for clarification or thinking about the context, you just assume you understand perfectly. But a critical mind stops. It reflects. It investigates. It asks, is this true? Is this complete? Is there more to this than I'm being shown? What is the evidence? In that moment of pause, something radical happens. Control is taken back. For your English, it means truly understanding, not just memorizing. Critical thinking is not a skill reserved only for scholars or philosophers, for people with special education. It's a human necessity, a mental survival tool in a world overflowing with manipulation, distraction, and noise. Every message you receive, especially in English from various sources, carries a motive. Every story holds a slant. Every opinion is shaped by unseen forces, by biases or agendas. Think about how much English content you consume online: news articles, social media posts, YouTube videos, podcasts. In such a world, the untrained mind is vulnerable. It believes the loudest voice. It follows the strongest crowd. It confuses repetition with truth, thinking that if something is said often enough, it must be real. And slowly, thought by thought, it becomes someone else's echo, losing its own unique voice. But the critical mind resists this fate. When you encounter a new English idiom, for example, a non-critical mind might just memorize it. A critical mind asks, why do they use this phrase? What's the origin? In what situations is it really used? Can I think of similar phrases in my own language? It is not content with appearances. It sees beyond the surface and listens beneath the noise. It understands that information is not knowledge, and knowledge is not wisdom. It refuses to accept simplicity, where complexity truly exists. It does not confuse popularity with validity, understanding that just because many people believe something, it doesn't make it right. It lives in pursuit of something deeper, truth that withstands scrutiny, logic that survives questioning, and ideas that are earned through effort, not just inherited without thought. To think critically is to claim ownership of your own thought. In English learning, this means taking responsibility for your own understanding. It is the decision to not let anyone else dictate what is believed, what is feared, or what is followed. It is a rebellion against mental laziness. It is a powerful declaration that thought should not be outsourced, not to politicians, not to influencers, not to tradition, not even to your own personal biases. Critical thinking reclaims the mind from the grip of passivity. It is not negativity. It is not rebellion for the sake of defiance. It is clarity. It is focus. It is the pursuit of understanding, even when the answers are uncomfortable. especially when the answers are uncomfortable. Because critical thinking is not about protecting comfort. It is about discovering truth. And truth is often messy. It threatens what is familiar. It demands what is difficult. It breaks apart what has never been questioned before. But in that discomfort lies growth. In that challenge lies freedom. The world has never needed more information. It already drowns in it. What it needs is discernment. The ability to separate signal from noise, fact from fiction, insight from illusion. And that ability doesn't come from education alone. It doesn't come from intelligence alone. It comes from the courage to think critically. The courage to stop and ask, why is this true? Who benefits if I believe this? What evidence supports this claim? What perspective is missing here? For English learners, this means applying these questions to the English content you read, watch, and hear. Critical thinking empowers. It liberates. It protects. It is the foundation of meaningful decisions, powerful conversations, and real progress. Without it, people are vulnerable to propaganda, manipulation, fear-mongering, and false certainty. With it, they become architects of their own beliefs, not victims of someone else's agenda. The strength of a mind is not measured by how much it knows, but by how well it thinks, not by the speed of its reaction, but by the depth of its reflection, not by how often it agrees, but by how bravely it questions. Critical thinking is the path to that strength. It is the beginning of all wisdom, all progress, and all liberation. This is not just a mental exercise, it is a mindset, a way of life, a discipline of relentless inquiry, a daily practice of refusing to accept what is easy over what is true. Because in a world full of noise, distraction, and influence, the one who truly thinks is rare, and the one who thinks critically is powerful. Critical thinking is a term used often, praised widely, yet understood deeply by few. It is not a buzzword, not a clever phrase to drop in conversation. It is a discipline, a mindset, a tool set for navigating reality with precision. It is more than just thinking deeply or being smart. Intelligence without critical thinking is potential without direction. Information without evaluation is just noise, a collection of facts without meaning. At its core, critical thinking is the ability to engage with information actively and rationally. For English learners, this means not just passively listening to a podcast or reading a book, but engaging with the language. It is the conscious process of analyzing, questioning, assessing, and evaluating facts, assumptions, beliefs, and arguments. And this applies not just to those that come from others, but also to those that live inside your own mind, like your assumptions about English grammar or vocabulary. It is about slowing down the rush of automatic thinking and asking, is this reasonable? Is this supported by evidence? Is this complete? It is not about thinking more. It's about thinking better, thinking with structure, thinking with purpose, thinking with discipline. Critical thinking does not leave conclusions to chance or emotion. It requires evidence. It demands logic. It respects the process more than the outcome. It doesn't just arrive at answers. It earns them through careful thought. True critical thinking operates with a dual lens. It observes both the external world and the internal biases that interpret it. For English learners, this means being aware of your own biases when reading or listening to English content. Are you quick to believe certain information in English because it aligns with what you already think? It is not only about questioning others, it is about questioning one's own filters, reactions, and assumptions. It understands that every mind is filled with unseen influences: culture, upbringing, fear, ego, habits. These influences shape thought, often silently, often powerfully. And so critical thinking turns the spotlight inward as much as outward. It does not seek comfort. It seeks clarity. It does not chase certainty. It embraces complexity. Life is not made of simple answers, yet minds crave simplicity. Critical thinking resists this temptation. It welcomes the gray areas. It lives in the tension between opposing ideas until deeper understanding emerges. It values nuance over noise, substance over speed, and truth over ego. In practice, critical thinking is a process of steps. It starts with observation. What is being said or presented? For English learners, this means careful listening to pronunciation, intonation, observing how native speakers use phrases in context, not just in a dictionary. Notice the body language, the tone, the full picture. It continues with analysis. This is the breaking down of complex information into its core elements. If you're reading a complex English sentence, can you identify the subject, verb, object? Can you break down a long paragraph into its main ideas and supporting details? An argument is not accepted as a whole. It is dissected. What is the claim? What are the premises? What assumptions are hiding beneath the surface? Analysis separates emotional appeal from logical reasoning, popularity from validity, opinion from fact. It takes the shiny exterior off a statement and examines the structure beneath. Then comes interpretation. This is the moment when the thinker asks, what does this actually mean? For English learners, this is crucial. What does that idiom really mean in this situation? What is the speaker implying, even if they don't say it directly? Not what it pretends to mean, not what it's supposed to mean, but what it really means in context. Interpretation demands clarity and honesty. It resists distortion and refuses to be guided by wishful thinking. It requires stepping back and considering the bigger picture. Not just the message, but the intention behind it, the history around it, and the consequences that may follow. After interpretation comes evaluation. This is the testing ground of ideas. How strong is the logic? How credible is the source? For English learners, this means evaluating the English content you consume. Is this news article reliable? Is this YouTube teacher a good source of information? How reliable is the evidence? Are the conclusions justified? Or are they assumptions dressed up as facts? Evaluation demands intellectual integrity. It does not accept arguments based on volume, emotion, or authority. It demands proof, coherence, and balance. Following evaluation is inference, the ability to draw logical conclusions based on what has been analyzed and interpreted. This is where thinking becomes active. The mind no longer just receives information. It generates insight. When you read a story in English, can you infer what might happen next, or what a character's motivations are, even if it's not explicitly stated? Inference is not guessing. It is the art of forming reasoned, justifiable conclusions grounded in careful thought. It is where decision-making begins to take shape. Next comes explanation. It is not enough to reach conclusions. They must be communicated clearly. A critical thinker explains their reasoning, not to persuade, but to illuminate. For English learners, this means practicing explaining your thoughts and conclusions clearly in English. Can you summarize an article in your own English words? Can you explain why you hold a certain opinion, using logical steps? They lay out their logic, share their evidence, and allow others to follow the path. Explanation is the bridge between private understanding and shared truth. Finally, there is problem-solving, the real-world application of all that has been learned. Critical thinking is not just a theoretical exercise. It is meant to drive action, solve challenges, improve systems, and guide decisions. For English learners, this could mean solving a miscommunication with a native speaker by applying your critical thinking skills to clarify meaning, or using your understanding of English cultural nuances to navigate a social situation. Problem-solving is where thought meets purpose. It is where clarity becomes courage and insight becomes impact. These steps, observation, analysis, interpretation, evaluation, inference, explanation, and problem-solving, form a powerful mental framework. Each one builds upon the last. Each one strengthens the thinker's ability to handle complexity, uncertainty, and ambiguity. Together, they create a disciplined process that turns scattered thoughts into sharp insight, vague opinions into well-formed conclusions. But none of this happens by accident. The process of critical thinking requires attention, effort, and persistence. It must be practiced, refined, and repeated. It is not a shortcut. It is not a hack. It is work. But it is work that pays off again and again, because it develops something far more valuable than answers. It develops judgment. Good judgment is not luck. It is not instinct. It is built from thousands of moments where the mind chose to question instead of assume, to analyze instead of react, to reflect instead of rush. The process of critical thinking is what makes that judgment possible. In a world that values speed over depth, noise over nuance, and certainty over curiosity, this process is an act of rebellion. It is a way to reclaim control over thought in an age where thought is constantly being hijacked. The process is powerful, not because it guarantees the right answers, but because it protects against the wrong ones. It strengthens the mind against manipulation, against confusion, against the pressure to conform. It creates thinkers who are not easily swayed, not easily fooled, and not easily silenced. This is not just a method. It is a way to rise above the noise, to stand with clarity in the middle of chaos, and to make decisions that are grounded, honest, and wise. If critical thinking is the mind's greatest power, then its greatest enemy is blind acceptance. This is the silent agreement, the unexamined belief, the casual yes that carries unseen consequences. This is not just a weakness, it is a threat. Because where blind acceptance rules, truth is distorted, logic is abandoned, and manipulation thrives unchecked. For English learners, blind acceptance can mean simply memorizing vocabulary without understanding its connotations or typical usage. It can mean believing every English article you read online, even from unreliable sources. It can mean accepting a grammar rule without understanding its exceptions or common variations in real speech. Blind acceptance begins where curiosity ends. It is the point at which questions stop being asked and assumptions start being treated as facts. It's not always loud. In fact, it's often quiet, disguised as politeness, masked as obedience, hidden beneath the comfort of routine. It's not only found in ignorance, it can live in intelligence, in success, in tradition, in authority. It thrives where people have stopped examining why they think what they think. In a world saturated with information, the danger is no longer a lack of data. It's a lack of discernment. Opinions are broadcast faster than facts can be checked. Narratives are repeated until they sound like truths. Algorithms reward repetition, not accuracy. And in this environment, blind acceptance is not just possible. It's easy, too easy. But ease is not an excuse, because with every unexamined belief accepted as truth, a mind gives away its power. With every unchecked opinion repeated as fact, a voice becomes an echo. With every unchallenged narrative, the line between reality and illusion fades, and slowly, the mind becomes a reflection of what it has consumed, rather than a source of its own understanding. Critical thinking is what pushes back. It is the shield against falsehood and the sword against manipulation. It asks, who said this? Why should I believe it? What evidence supports it? What is being left out? For English learners, this means, is this slang really used that way? Did this famous quote actually come from that person? Is this grammar explanation always true? Or are there exceptions? These are not questions of rebellion. They are questions of responsibility, of intellectual integrity. Because the unthinking mind is not just vulnerable, it is dangerous. It can be used. It can be moved. It can be made to follow, to spread, to justify anything it's told. Blind acceptance is the fuel of misinformation, prejudice, extremism, and control. It is what makes lies persuasive and what gives illusions their grip. It does not require bad intentions, only passive minds, minds that are too busy, too distracted, too afraid, or too comfortable to question. Minds that mistake agreement for truth and conformity for wisdom. But truth does not fear questions. It welcomes them. It survives scrutiny. It grows stronger under examination. Only falsehood fears being examined. Only lies require silence. And so every question asked, every assumption tested, every belief challenged is not an act of disobedience. It is an act of clarity. Blind acceptance also thrives in tradition. The "this is how it's always been done" mentality. For English learners, this might mean sticking to one old textbook or one learning method, even if it's not working, just because it's familiar. But time does not make something true. Popularity does not make something right. Familiarity does not make something wise. Critical thinking challenges tradition, not to destroy it, but to refine it. It separates what is timeless from what is outdated, what is valuable from what is harmful. Without that process, societies stagnate, ideas decay, progress stops. The price of blind acceptance is not paid all at once. It is paid slowly over time. As thought becomes habit, and habit becomes belief. As mental shortcuts replace careful reasoning. As complexity is traded for simplicity. And eventually, people stop thinking, not because they can't, but because they no longer remember how. But the mind was not made to follow blindly. It was made to seek, to question, to explore. Critical thinking is that natural instinct reawakened. It is the restoration of mental independence. It is the refusal to hand over belief to convenience, fear, or authority. It is the rejection of being mentally spoon-fed and the decision to chew every idea before swallowing, to truly digest it. To think critically is to draw a line between awareness and autopilot, between wisdom and repetition, between truth and noise. That line is not always easy to draw, but it is always necessary. Because what's at stake is more than one decision, one opinion, or one belief. What's at stake is mental freedom, and without that freedom, the mind becomes a prisoner of someone else's agenda, someone else's narrative, someone else's version of reality. Blind acceptance is the enemy, and the only way to defeat it is with thought. Real, rigorous, relentless thought. Thought that questions. Thought that tests. Thought that sees through the illusion and chooses truth, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. Doubt has been misunderstood for far too long. It's often treated as weakness, labeled as hesitation, viewed as a threat to confidence, to certainty, to belief. But in truth, doubt is not the enemy of thought. It is its origin. It is the spark that ignites the fire of inquiry. It is the moment the mind pauses and asks, "What if this isn't true? What if there's another way to look at this?" That single question is not a breakdown of belief. It is the beginning of understanding. For English learners, doubt can be invaluable. If you hear a phrase that seems strange, or a grammar rule that doesn't quite make sense in a particular context, don't just accept it. Doubt is not destruction. It is a doorway. It opens the mind to the possibility that there is more to learn, more to examine, more to uncover. Without doubt, the mind becomes rigid, closed off, certain of things it has never truly explored. It clings to assumptions, labels, and illusions simply because they are familiar. But doubt shatters that comfort. It asks for proof. It demands clarity. It refuses to be satisfied with easy answers. In the process of critical thinking, doubt plays a central role. It is the gatekeeper of the intellect. It prevents the mind from falling into blind belief. It holds back the impulse to agree, to accept, to conform without thought. And though it is uncomfortable, it is also essential, because truth does not fear doubt. It survives it. It grows through it. Anything that collapses under doubt was never truth to begin with. To doubt is not to reject everything. It is to pause before accepting. It is to apply pressure to ideas and see what holds. It is the process of testing, of filtering, of refining thought. A mind that doubts is not weak. It is strong enough to question its own conclusions. It does not see uncertainty as a flaw, but as a natural part of discovery. Because growth does not begin with knowing. It begins with not knowing. It begins with admitting, "I'm not sure yet." This is a powerful position for an English learner. Instead of saying, "I just don't understand this English concept," you can say, "I'm not sure I fully grasp this yet. Let me look for more examples, or ask my teacher." There is a difference between destructive skepticism and constructive doubt. Destructive skepticism tears down for the sake of tearing down. It rejects without reason. It doubts everything and believes nothing. But constructive doubt is different. It is guided by curiosity, not cynicism. It questions not to deny, but to understand. It is a companion of reason, not an enemy of truth. Constructive doubt leads to stronger beliefs, not weaker ones. It forces ideas to be earned, not inherited. It challenges arguments to be solid, not convenient. It pushes thinking to go deeper, to gather evidence, to find better reasoning. And once a belief survives that kind of scrutiny, it is no longer a blind belief. It is a belief forged in clarity. In a world where speed is worshipped and certainty is celebrated, doubt is often ignored. Fast answers are rewarded. Bold claims are shared. Loud opinions dominate. But doubt slows things down. It asks people to think longer, to look closer, to wait before concluding. That patience is rare, but that patience is powerful. The role of doubt is also deeply personal. It keeps the ego in check. It reminds the mind that being wrong is not a failure. It's an opportunity. It allows beliefs to evolve, ideas to improve, understanding to expand. It creates mental flexibility, the ability to update thinking as new information appears. Without doubt, the mind becomes arrogant. With it, the mind becomes humble and sharp. Doubt also protects. It protects against manipulation, against propaganda, against groupthink. It is the quiet voice that says, "Just because everyone says it doesn't mean it's true." It shields the mind from being swept away by trends, headlines, or emotional pressure. It provides a pause, a moment to breathe, to step back, to assess. And in that pause, freedom returns. To live without doubt is to live without questions. And to live without questions is to accept a version of the world that may be false, incomplete, or dangerous. Doubt invites questions. Questions invite thought. And thought leads to truth. Not just the truth that feels good, but the truth that withstands the weight of reason. Let doubt do its work. Let it unsettle false confidence. Let it dissolve lazy conclusions. Let it sharpen understanding. Doubt is not the absence of belief. It is the foundation of real belief. Not belief built on repetition or emotion, but belief grounded in evidence, in reason, in clarity. In the journey of critical thinking, doubt is the compass. It may not give immediate direction, but it keeps the thinker from walking in circles. It refuses to accept illusions as answers, and in doing so, it protects what matters most: the integrity of the mind. Critical thinking is not automatic. It does not simply arise from intelligence or education. It must be cultivated and defended. because even the sharpest minds can be dulled by invisible forces. These forces are the barriers, silent, persistent, and deeply rooted. They distort perception, disrupt logic, and hold the mind hostage until they are recognized and removed. Critical thinking remains locked behind them. The first and perhaps most pervasive barrier is confirmation bias. This is the tendency to search for, interpret, and remember information in a way that confirms what is already believed. For an English learner, this might mean only seeking out English content that agrees with your existing political views, or only listening to speakers with a certain accent, thereby limiting your exposure and challenging your understanding. This bias doesn't ask, "What is true?" It asks, "What feels true?" It makes the mind favor familiarity over accuracy, agreement over challenge. And when it takes over, evidence becomes selective, arguments become one-sided, and growth becomes impossible. Confirmation bias is subtle because it feels comfortable. It reassures. It flatters. It says, "You were right all along." But critical thinking begins with the opposite attitude. What if I'm wrong? That willingness to be corrected is where real strength lies. Without it, the mind becomes trapped in a loop of self-affirmation, hearing only what it agrees with, rejecting what it doesn't, and calling that wisdom. Another barrier is emotional reasoning. This is allowing feelings to dictate what is accepted as fact. When this barrier is active, logic is replaced by mood. For example, an English learner might feel overwhelmed and frustrated when they can't understand a complex English sentence, and then conclude that English is too hard for them, even if it's just one difficult sentence. A statement feels offensive, so it must be false. A claim feels comforting, so it must be true. But reality is not defined by emotion. Facts do not shift based on how they make people feel. Emotional reasoning blinds the mind to truth by wrapping belief in the fog of sentiment. There is also ego, the subtle force that resists being wrong. The ego doesn't care about truth. It cares about being right. It defends opinions even when the evidence collapses. It takes questions as attacks and corrections as threats. For an English learner, ego might stop you from asking a stupid question in class, or from making a mistake in front of others. It might make you avoid speaking English because you're afraid of sounding imperfect. Ego says, protect your pride at all costs. But critical thinking says, protect your clarity above all. To think critically, the ego must be humbled. It must be quieted long enough for new insight to be heard. Groupthink is another powerful barrier. The pressure to conform can silence the individual mind. It says, don't question, just agree. It rewards loyalty over logic, obedience over observation. In groupthink, thinking becomes outsourced. People adopt the beliefs of the majority without examination, not because those beliefs are sound, but because they are safe. For English learners, this might mean following a popular but ineffective learning method just because everyone else is doing it, instead of finding what truly works for you. But safety is not a substitute for truth. Critical thinking requires standing apart when needed, not to oppose, but to examine independently. Mental laziness is also a barrier. choosing comfort over clarity, defaulting to assumption instead of analysis. Thinking is work. It demands energy, discipline, and time. In a world addicted to speed, shortcuts, and surface-level answers, the temptation to skim instead of study is strong. For English learners, this might mean using Google Translate for every single phrase instead of trying to infer meaning from context and looking up individual words, or avoiding challenging English texts for easier ones. But clarity does not come to the hurried. Wisdom is not downloaded in seconds. It is earned through slow, sustained effort. Critical thinking cannot thrive in a mind that resists effort. Then there is information overload, a modern barrier born from excess, not scarcity. With so much data, so many voices, so many competing claims, the mind can shut down. It becomes passive, overwhelmed, unable to discern what matters. For English learners, this is very real. Too many apps, too many textbooks, too many online resources, so you end up doing nothing at all, feeling paralyzed by choice. This overload creates confusion, and confusion creates apathy. Critical thinking cuts through this fog, not by consuming more, but by questioning better, not by believing faster, but by filtering deeper. Lastly, fear of being wrong, fear of standing out, fear of what the truth might demand. This is perhaps the most paralyzing barrier, because fear doesn't just cloud thinking, it prevents it. It pushes people to accept easy lies over hard truths. It silences questions that might expose inconvenient realities. For an English learner, this is the fear of speaking, the fear of making a mistake, the fear of not being understood, which stops you from practicing and improving. But critical thinking demands courage, the courage to face doubt, to endure discomfort, to accept that some answers will unsettle rather than soothe. These barriers, confirmation bias, emotional reasoning, ego, groupthink, mental laziness, information overload, and fear are not rare. They are present in every environment, every community, every generation. They are not always visible, but they are always active. To think clearly is to recognize them, to name them, and to confront them with discipline. The mind cannot move forward if it's chained by these invisible forces, and no amount of intelligence or education can overcome them unless they are consciously challenged. Awareness is the first step. Resistance is the next. Only when these barriers are broken can thought rise above opinion, above influence, above illusion. Critical thinking is not just what the mind does. It's what the mind becomes when it is free. Free from distortion. Free from manipulation. So as we come to the end of today's truly insightful episode on the profound power of critical thinking, let's take a moment to breathe and reflect. We've explored a truly transformative topic today, one that impacts every aspect of our lives, from how we navigate daily information to, most importantly for our conversation today, how we learn and master English. We began by understanding that critical thinking is not just about being smart. It's about being active and intentional with our thoughts. For you, as intermediate English learners, this means engaging with English not just by memorizing, but by truly understanding, by questioning, analyzing, and seeking deeper truth behind the words, phrases, and cultural nuances, rather than passively accepting everything you read or hear. We discussed how critical thinking is a necessary tool for navigating a world full of English information, where it's easy to be misled if we don't think for ourselves. For example, by misinformation online. We learn that it's about owning your thoughts and resisting the urge to let others dictate your beliefs, even when it comes to English grammar rules or common expressions. Then, we delved into the detailed process of critical thinking, breaking it down into essential steps like observation, analysis, interpretation, evaluation, inference, explanation, and problem-solving. For your English learning, this translates into practical actions, observing how native speakers really use English, analyzing complex English sentences, interpreting implied meanings, evaluating the reliability of English learning resources, inferring vocabulary from context, explaining your thoughts clearly in English conversations, and problem-solving communication breakdowns. We saw how each step builds on the last, creating a strong and reliable framework for clear and logical thought. We emphasize that this is a journey of continuous learning and refinement, not something you master overnight, but a skill that grows with consistent practice. A key part of our discussion was the vital role of doubt. We reframed doubt not as a weakness, but as the very beginning of true understanding. It's the courage to ask, what if this isn't true? What if there's another way to say this in English? What if this translation isn't quite right? That allows us to grow and strengthen our understanding, making our English more precise and natural. We distinguished between destructive skepticism and constructive doubt, highlighting how the latter leads to deeper insights and more resilient truths, beliefs that stand up to scrutiny. Finally, we shone a bright light on the invisible barriers that often prevent us from thinking critically: confirmation bias, emotional reasoning, ego, groupthink, mental laziness, information overload, and fear. For you, as English learners, these barriers might manifest as sticking to old, comfortable learning habits, getting frustrated and giving up when something is difficult, being afraid to make mistakes when speaking, following popular but unhelpful learning trends, or feeling overwhelmed by too many English resources. Recognizing these barriers is the crucial first step to overcoming them, to freeing our minds from their subtle grip and allowing true critical thought to flourish in your English journey. My personal takeaway from this journey, and I hope it resonates deeply with you too, is that the pursuit of critical thinking is a lifelong commitment to mental freedom. It's about constantly challenging yourself to think better, to question more deeply, and to seek clarity above all else, even when it's uncomfortable. It's about being an active participant in your own understanding of the world, rather than a passive observer simply consuming information. For your English, this means becoming an active learner, an engaged listener, and a thoughtful speaker. Now, I want to invite you to try something after this episode. The next time you encounter new English vocabulary or a new grammar structure, don't just write it down and move on. Pause. Ask yourself, where else might I use this word or phrase? Is it formal or informal? How does this grammar rule compare to my native language? Can I find another example of it being used by a native speaker? Or, if you're reading an English news article, take a moment to consider the source. Is it a biased publication? Are there other sources that report this information differently? Even a small attempt to engage critically can make a big difference in how deeply you learn and retain English, and how you understand the world. Remember, this is a journey of progress, not perfection. Every time you pause to question, every time you seek deeper understanding, you are strengthening your critical thinking muscles and your English skills. You are becoming a more powerful, more discerning individual, capable of navigating complexity with wisdom. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I know this was a deep dive, but I truly believe that developing critical thinking is essential for your success, not just in English, but in all areas of your life. If you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, I'd be so grateful if you could share it with someone who might need to hear these ideas, someone who could benefit from this powerful skill. And don't forget to follow English in Fluency for more episodes about personal growth, communication, and building confidence, all while improving your English. We are building a community of curious, thoughtful, and fluent English speakers here, and I'm so glad you're a part of it. Your dedication inspires me every day. Keep practicing, keep questioning, and keep growing. I believe in you. Until next time, take care of yourself, and always remember, progress, not perfection.